Okay, welcome everybody to DIY Marketing for Artists with Mary Ellen Bernard. Um, so Mary Ellen is going to be a great presenter, I believe, for this topic because she has experience in both the arts world as well as in the marketing world. So she's a writer and performer, but she's also had a long career in book publishing as a copywriter and creative director. And she, as a singer and songwriter, she's released 3 CDs and through her own promotional efforts, received airplay on more than 50 radio stations and shows across the United States and Europe. She has booked and publicized her own concerts at coffee houses, clubs, theaters, and festivals, opening for such renowned artists as John Prine, Tom Paxton, and Richie Havens. So that's pretty impressive. You sound like you know what you're doing, Mary Ellen. So teach us.
I hope so. Yeah, a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight really is a combination of, what I learned in my day job in publishing houses and at a small promotion and advertising agency, and what I learned on my own, promoting myself as a self-managed artist. So I'm going to assume that no one in our little room went into the arts to become a salesperson. Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't either. Unfortunately, as many of you may know, we spend a lot of time selling in the arts world. And whether we're auditioning or soliciting funding or booking gigs or, trying to draw an audience to our shows or attract followers on social media, we're always selling. And worse yet, we're selling ourselves. Excuse me, which is the hardest thing in the world to do, I think. And often, I think we kind of go at it without a real clear idea as to what we should be saying. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is what you should do before you get into marketing mode. Because before you do that, you really need to know a few things. You need to know what your message is. You need to know what kind of materials or media you're going to need to get your message out there, who you're going to be sending your message to, and you need to know what kind of visual image you're going to project. And to help you figure that out, I'm going to introduce you to the 3 big questions that form the basis of any marketing plan, whether you're selling wonderful artwork or a pair of sneakers. And those 3 questions are, what are you selling? Who are you trying to reach? And what do you want from them? That all-important call to action, as we call it in marketing. And I'm going to drill down further into each of these questions with even more questions. That's basically what this presentation is going to be about, asking yourself questions. And the end goal of that is to help you come up with some interesting specifics about yourself and your work that'll help you, that you can use in your marketing. And then after the workshop, you'll get a handout with the questions that I'm suggesting tonight, along with some of the tips that I'm going to provide. So you can have this as a little guide and a reference that you can use for yourselves. So first of all, I talked to a few people as we were waiting for others to log on, but let's just see who all we have or what types of artists we have with us. It does seem that we have a lot of visual artists with us. Dan, you came on after I was talking to everyone, and Hal, what do both of you do? Dan?
I'm a visual artist. I do caricature paintings, a lot of commissions. I do party caricature, and I do other types of artwork like landscapes and more concept-oriented figurative work, and some other work. Yeah,
Great.
actually.
Okay, great. And Hal, how about you?
I'm a keyboard, guitar, singer, entertainer. I also work with a lot of vocal groups and jazz combos. And on the side, I'm also trying to sell about 1,000 paintings that my father had just completed during the course of his lifetime. And my mom over here, Joyce Keshner, she's a voice teacher.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. So we have at least one other representative from the performing side of the arts world. Everybody else is a visual artist. And somebody just binged on.
I'm sorry. That's my, I got it.
Okay, no worries. So at any rate, the information that I'm going to give all of you will be used, differently by each of you, depending on your discipline, obviously, but the general principles, will still apply. And hopefully they'll be helpful to all of you, whatever stage of your career you're in. So the three big questions: what are you selling? Who are you trying to reach? And what do you want from them? Now, why are these questions important? Because the answers to these questions will give you the content that you need to create your website or your press release or your e-blast or your whatever it is that you're trying to pitch in in the arts world or in the world of your projects. The answers will also give you a guide for the creative decisions you need to make in developing those elements. Now, those of you who are visual artists, and all of you, as even Hal, who obviously has his hand in the visual arts as well, and has it in his family, all of you understand that, you're going to make creative decisions as part of your art, but also as part of your sales pitch or as part of your marketing efforts. So hopefully what I'm going to talk about tonight is basically going to give you a better idea of how to describe yourself in words and how to present yourself visually, which all of you obviously realize is a very important aspect of selling yourself. So the first question, let me start sharing my screen here for all of you. The first question: what are you selling? Of course, you're selling yourself as an artist. You're selling maybe not only that, but you might be selling your latest creative project. If anybody is working with an arts organization, you might be selling that. And you might have kind of a general handle on all of this already, but in my view, it's really worth clarifying that for yourself and articulating it in writing. Now, all of you are visual people, so maybe it's something you want to articulate visually, but sooner or later, you're going to have to put something into words, whether it's a press release or a post, or an artist statement or whatever. So I feel that articulating it in writing really, really helps. And as a writer, I even forget that sometimes. And I made myself do it when I submitted a musical that I just finished to a competition for a residency. And I realized that in writing the synopsis, I started understanding more what the show was about. So really putting stuff in writing really does help. Not only that, but this is the heart of your content, this idea of what you're selling. This is going to provide you with content that you're going to use in all of these marketing efforts. And it's going to give you some kind of a context for how you design that content and who you should target with that content. So the way I approach this question is basically to do research, the same way you'd research any kind of a product you're selling, except that in this case, the product is you or the product is your artwork. So let's do some self-research. And to do that, we're going to ask more questions. Well, let's start with some easy ones, which is, what do you do and what field or genre are you in? All right, all of you have basically already answered that question in a very basic way, but and that's fine to start with the basics and with the very basic answer. But as you go along, as you're developing this little kind of dossier about yourself, hopefully you'll be answering this question with a lot more specifics, because the more specific you can get, the better your content is going to be. So what do you do? What field are you in? First easy question. Then what kind of, where do you fit in your professional world? What kind of experience success or recognition have you had so far? This is the time when you're going to haul out your resume and look at all of those notable projects you were involved in, all of those successful shows, exhibits, publications, releases, awards, reviews, grants, competitions, whatever. And no matter if they seem unimportant at this point in your career, or if they seem unimportant at all, keep everything there, because it's going to be something that you can look at and draw upon, and you can choose later what the most important or most impressive ones are. But it's good to work with as much material as possible to start with. So what do? What's your field? Where do you fit in your professional world? What's your experience or recognition so far? And then fourth, is your work limited to a specific geographical region? And can that be expanded? Or is that maybe your sweet spot? This is good information to have for ourselves, because I know from my own experience, sometimes we tend to overextend ourselves when we're trying to promote. You know, it clearly doesn't make sense for us, if we're a local musician, say, to, you know, send our CDs to every reviewer in the country. Okay, maybe we want reviews all over the country. That's fine, particularly since people can access, you know, even artwork to see it online now. But we're not necessarily going to go after a gig in California if we live in New York State, unless we have, you know, 5 or 10 gigs in California, because it's simply not realistic to do that. So looking at realistically what our geographical region is, and whether we want to expand on that, or, you know, try to really just saturate that one area as best as we can, that's really good information for us to have as we try to promote ourselves. So those are some of the first easy questions that you can ask yourself to try to figure out, okay, what am I selling in this product? You know, that I'm the product, my art is the product. Now let's move on to some of the harder questions. Who are you as an artist? This was a very hard question for me to tackle. And I don't know about any of you, but I'm going to assume that it's difficult for a lot of artists because, you know, it's hard to be objective about ourselves and about our work. So answering this question, you know, it's not really about making yourself sound like the best of anything. It's about describing your art, your performance style, your music, whatever, in an honest way, but hopefully a compelling way as well. And I kind of look at this as a combination of reality and aspiration, you know, who we are and who we'd like to be, what we'd like to project, and where those things intersect, because we want to put our best foot forward, obviously, when we're marketing ourselves, but we also want to be truthful. And of course, we want to be truthful, but we don't want to undersell ourselves. We don't want to be, you know, so modest that we're underplaying what our capabilities are and what our talents are. So it's a tough question to answer for sure, but hopefully you'll get some clues by the end of this as to how to find your way toward answering that question. Hand in hand with that is, as you can see in the slide, what is your unique selling point, your USP, as they put it in the marketing world? How are you unique? How are you different? Again, not necessarily better, but what makes you stand out? What makes you special? Now, this could be something, you know, more cut and dried, like going back to your resume, your awards, your reviews, your contributions to your field, what you've done in your community, if you're some kind of an arts organization, or it could be just something that you do differently, something about your style, something about your background even. I'm going to give you a couple examples of artists who came up with some really interesting ways to show how unique they are and to make people interested enough to draw them into, you know, finding out more about them. several of these, and I apologize to all you visual artists, several of these are performing artists because that's my area. So that's what I'm, drawn to, and that's what I know best. But again, these are examples that, you can use for yourself as well, just to get an idea of the kind of things that you can draw on to show that you're unique. This first artist, Venice Thomas, is a really amazing R&B and soul singer and songwriter as well. Unfortunately, there are a lot of really amazing R&B and soul singers in the country and in the world. But the thing that's different about Vanice is that she was born and raised in Memphis and comes from a musical family, R&B royalty, really, I would venture to say. Her father was a DJ at the first Black radio station and was the first Black DJ who put himself out on a limb and said, we should be playing Elvis Presley at a time when the other Black DJs were feeling that their music was being co-opted by this white artist. And he said, no, he is an important figure and we need to play him. Her siblings are equally talented and have equally great careers in the R&B and soul world. So what Venice has begun to use to sell herself is that lineage. And this line really captures it. Venice's royal familial lineage guarantees that extraordinary music comes naturally to the singer. So it's saying that, her background, tells you that she's the real deal. So if you're interested in this type of music, this is somebody that you should know about. Moving to our next example, Janie Barnett, an equally amazing performing artist and singer-songwriter in a completely different genre, the genre of Americana, which is not quite folk, not quite country, a little more rootsy than either of those. But she calls herself Brooklyn branded Americana. So she differentiates herself from other Americana artists by, putting herself in the urban world, which she is in, making herself, showing that she's just got a little more edge to what she does, maybe a little more sophistication, maybe a little more elegance. And in fact, her most recent project is called Reimagining Cole Porter, an Americana project. She does Cole Porter, an entire album of Cole Porter songs in the Americana style with Americana instrumentation. So she's differentiated herself both by this nice little phrase that she uses and by this latest project that she's put out. Moving on to this guy, Vance Gilbert, another amazing artist. Vance is squarely in the folk world, but he is also someone who I think could completely get over in a stand-up comedy room. And he was described very well by a reviewer who said, if Joni Mitchell and Richie Havens had a love child with Rodney Dangerfield as the midwife, that's Vance Gilbert. He defies stereotypes. And that is such a perfect way to describe him because he's a wonderful singer-songwriter and he's also screamingly funny. And Vance goes on to describe himself further and show how he really does defy stereotypes by saying, I'm Black, I sing, I play an acoustic guitar, and I don't play the blues. So he is saying to you, you look at me and you see one thing, but that's not what you're going to get. So another great way of differentiating himself. I also like to use this theater company, Steppenwolf Theater Company, and talk about their unique selling point, because in a profile of the group that I watched not too long ago and showed in one of my classes, the founders of the group described what they do and what they did, especially when they first started, as rock and roll in your face theater, which I think is a great way that, that they used to distinguish themselves in the theater world in the 60s. And finally, someone who is not a performer, well, she is actually a performer in that she's a flamenco dancer, but that's not her primary art form. She's primarily a costume designer, And her bio, one line in her bio reads, costume designer, dressmaker, flamenco dancer. Now, you don't usually see the phrase flamenco dancer in a bio of a costume designer, but this costume designer, who has worked in film, in television, and in theater, at some point in her career and in her life, decided to take flamenco lessons and fell in love with that world and started designing costumes specifically for flamenco dancers. So this is a wonderful way that she differentiates herself from other people in the costume design field. Not too many people, you know, call themselves a flamenco dancer who are also calling themselves costume designers. So just a few examples of this idea of a unique selling point. And these questions, who are you as an artist? What's your unique selling point? As I said, are kind of hard to answer for many of us, but I want to now give you some tips as to how you can start digging into them. I'm going to stop my share at this point. So how can you start digging into these questions? How to approach this self-research that I was talking about? One thing that I found to be very useful is don't be afraid to compare yourself. Now, clearly, you don't want to be a copy of someone else. Nobody does. But, you know, we have to think of Spotify and Netflix and how, you know, we get suggestions from them based on our previous viewing and our previous listening. And the reason for that is that comparisons give people a frame of reference. You know, I mean, you could describe your work with a number of different descriptives, and somebody may still not quite understand it. But as soon as you compare it to something that already exists, suddenly they get it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to literally compare your work to that of another artist, you know, either contemporary or from, you know, from the ages. But using that comparison may help you. So have fans or reviewers compared you to some other artist, or is there one that you think you might be similar to? If you think about that, that may help you. How are you similar? How are you different? Can you research how that artist is marketed or presented? That may give you ideas on how to present yourself, or maybe on what markets to target. It's a very good exercise, and I found that it helped me a lot when I was starting out. When I was first performing in cabarets and clubs, and then trying to release an album, I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere because I liked a lot of different styles of music. I performed a lot of different styles of music. I incorporated comedy into what I did. If I sent I had a couple jazz tunes, but if I sent my album to a jazz station, they'd say, this isn't really jazz. Same thing with pop or folk. And I finally lit on Bette Midler as a touchstone because she was somebody I really admired. And when she was performing her live shows, I realized that we had several similarities, although I was really nothing like her as a performer. She was very brassy and brash and bawdy, and I was none of those things. But both of us did have a sense of theatricality and a sense of humor that we used in our shows. And we did a lot of different styles of music. So using her as kind of a template really helped me in my research as to how to present myself. And it also sort of gave me a little validation at a time when I kind of needed, you know, that sort of confidence about the fact that, yeah, I could do this, even if I get some weird responses from people who think that I'm unfocused or, you know, I don't know where I belong. So, you know, sometimes we need permission to kind of go our own way, and we can find that in someone else as an example who's doing exactly that, only perhaps in a different way, of course. So don't be afraid to compare yourself, at least in your own mind, when you're trying to think about how to describe yourself. My second tip, gather interesting personal tidbits, having nothing to do with your art necessarily. I don't know if any of you have ever done this so far, but if you haven't, I highly recommend it. Maybe for instance, you ran a marathon, or you held local office, or you have some cause that you support. How does this suggestion help you? Well, the press likes interesting story angles if you're trying to get media coverage. Personal experiences not connected to your art offer a writer a fresh approach to doing a profile of you. Maybe it's your hometown. Maybe it's some offbeat, interesting survival job that you have. Maybe it's some hobby that you have. How interesting it is to read about an artist who is also a beekeeper and who finds inspiration from the natural world when they create their art. Or a stand-up comic who's a psychiatrist by day. So that, using our whole selves and all of our experiences as, some interesting kind of fodder to put out there definitely helps in making people look at us in a different way. Because now you're not just a musician, another musician, or another photographer, or another painter. This kind of thinking also helps get publicity for you beyond the section that applies to you. For instance, the food section might love to run an article about a group of musicians who also happen to be great cooks. But the music section might ignore those very same musicians because they're just not famous enough to cover. So, it doesn't matter whether you're getting publicity, in the art section or in the music section. You just want people to read about you and to find out about you. And however they find out about you, that's fine. So remember that it's not always just about your art when you're trying to promote yourself. It's about your whole self. And sometimes that really enters the picture. And of course, what you are, contributes to your art form. So it makes total sense to use every piece of yourself when you're trying to promote yourself. So compare yourself, gather interesting personal tidbits. My third suggestion is get outside opinions. It's very tough to be objective about ourselves and our work. So ask trusted fans, ask our friends, ask advisors, ask mentors, how they might describe you or how they might describe this latest work of yours that you somehow don't have a handle on verbally. Ask for feedback on what you do. When I first released my CDs, especially the first one, I was asking for my friends' opinions on everything, on my photos, on my album titles, on my designs, because I really couldn't look at all of it objectively and I couldn't see it as the public might see it. So someone outside of me, had a better grasp of that. Now, maybe some people are going to give you, some really oddball feedback or opinions that you're not going to take. But, in some cases, they might give you some very interesting, feedback. And in fact, if you start getting the same feedback from a couple different people, you'll know that in my little focus group, that may be the photo, or that may be the best piece to put on the front of my website, or that may be the best way to describe myself. Another thing that is really worth doing, and I have a feeling that all of you are doing this already because many of you seem to know each other, is connect with other artists. When I was first starting out, again, along the same lines as, asking people for advice and for opinions, I started a group of artists to get their opinions about certain things that I was doing. And that group ended up developing into a great networking group and a support group that ended up sharing advice and information with each other. So, never neglect your immediate family of artists who are willing to support you. Seek them out and, make use of them, support them, and they'll support you. Finally, use reviews and advance quotes. I don't know if this is something any of you are doing, but if not, you should. it's much better for someone else to have someone else say something complimentary about us than, you know, for us to have to say it ourselves. So if you've gotten great reviews, by all means, take snippets of those, take the best parts of those and use them in whatever promotion you're putting out there, clearly crediting the source, of course. But that's really gold, you know, that's a gold mine for self-promotion. And also advanced quotes. This is not something that you really use in the artwork, I don't think, but certainly in music and in the publishing world, it's used all the time, asking colleagues with even a modicum of name recognition for some little, you know, snippet of a quote to use when you're promoting your new project. In some cases, getting these kinds of quotes from people can also help you define who you are as an artist or give you your unique selling point. As an example, I actually had a DJ, you know, make an off-the-cuff comparison about me when my husband was talking about my latest album to him on the phone. And the guy had listened to it and he said, "Oh yeah, right. It's kind of like Tom Waits meets Tracy Ullman." And I went, "Wow, that's exactly what I am." And it gave me a catchphrase that I used for years and years, like until people forgot who Tom Waits and Tracy Ullman were. But, you know, this kind of using reviews, looking at what people say about you is definitely something that you want to hang on to and use, as Vance Gilbert did and Van East did in some of the, you know, those examples of unique selling points that I already pointed out. So, and then finally, make sure that you reassess and revise. You know, our work is always changing. We're always changing. You're changing direction. So the research that you do on yourself now may be different a year from now or 5 years from now. So reassess and revise, because you're going to want to put out, you know, different types of promotion and use different types of content as you progress in your career. And again, what are you going to get from this self-research? Well, it helps you develop how you describe yourself in words, as I said before, and how you present yourself visually, whether that's using photos or graphic images. So, what are you selling? Big first question. Next question, who are you trying to reach? Let me again share my screen. Now, some of you might be trying to reach media or press, the press, media and press. You might be trying to reach fans if you're a musician, or the general public as somebody trying to sell their artwork. You might be trying to reach funders. You might be trying to reach gallery owners. The first step in figuring out who you're trying to reach is to research your industry. You have to know who the gatekeepers are and what their expectations are. And again, going back to what I said before, you also want to keep in mind what your geographic reach is. You know, can you really reach out to industry worldwide or nationwide? Or do you need to limit it to a particular geographic area, to your local area, or to your regional area at least? So know people in your industry, know who they are and what they need when you're sending promotional materials to them. Create lists of those people, whether it's a fan mailing list, a media list, a list of professional contacts, and use these to make follow-ups and track your success. I mean, this goes beyond just marketing. Obviously, this is going to help you, you know, track your career and where it's going. But it also helps you, it also gives you content that you can then later use. This is, you know, adding to your resume and your dossier. You can talk about all of the exhibits you've had, the reviews you've gotten, you know, the places you've played, etc. And next, you have to decide what channels you're going to use to reach each of these groups of people. Do you need a dedicated website for yourself? Or is it fine to have a page on a professional portal like SoundCloud for musicians, like LinkedIn for, general professional people? Maybe there's a similar one for visual artists, for photographers or painters. You have to make that judgment call to meet to reach the people that you need to reach. Which of those do you need for yourself? And do you need to contact people individually, or are you going to do group outreach through social media and e-blasts? And do you want to do some kind of networking, whether that's online or in person? And finally, do you want to do media publicity or advertising or both? And again, is that going to be local, or is it going to be regional or national? And finally, in determining the last part of this question, who are you trying to reach? You want to tailor your content and your style and your approach to each of those groups that you're reaching out to, whichever they are, whether it's professionals or whether it's the public, whether it's the media or press or the public. And you want to meet the industry expectations. A music critic, for instance, wants to know, how groundbreaking your band is, or an art critic wants to know how groundbreaking your style is. But a music club is going to be more interested in whether you're going to put bodies in their club. They want to know how big your mailing list is, or how big your audience is, or that you sold out the smaller club down the block and now you need to play in a bigger room, or as an artist that, you sold X number of paintings at your last exhibition. And so they stand, to really benefit by putting you in their gallery or giving you an exhibit, a full exhibit of your own there. And in reaching out to people with specific materials, remember also in terms of style and content, a gallery owner or a funder, say, is going to expect, a very professional sounding cover letter or artist statement from you. But if you're a musician reaching out to fans, they're going to look for a more casual approach and a more personal approach from you. And that's how you should be reaching out to them. So who are you trying to reach? Know who they are with each type of outreach that you do. Know what channels you need to use and tailor your content to them. I want to talk for a second about photos. Now, you're all visual artists and we have a photographer too. So I'm sure you're really familiar with this idea that, a picture is really worth 1,000 words. And a striking photo gets attention from the media and from the public. If you're a musician and have a listing in the events section, you're going to get a lot more attention if you have a great photo with the caption than if you have a few lines of copy showing that, you're going to be playing at such and such a club on Tuesday night. But a photo is really something that's going to capture people's attention. Whether it's for, some kind of, whether it's a photo of yourself, whether it's, what you do, whether you're a musician or an artist being, showing your tools, whatever it is, a striking photograph is going to help you. And also, the type of photo is important. I'm trying to get a website here to give you an idea. If you're an actor, for instance, you, again, going back to industry standards, you're going to need a headshot if you're reaching out to agents and casting directors, because they have a specific thing that they're looking for. However, if you're an artist or a musician or an actor who's doing other things, you're then going to want something that's more of a personality shot, as Corinne Louie, the photographer, calls them on her website. So the type of photo that you're going to use is all important as well. And in addition to this type of photo, you also, and again, as visual artists, I'm sure you're understanding of this, you want to keep in mind what the end use of it is and the photo size, because clearly a beautiful body shot is fantastic. But if it's, scaled down to thumbnail size, it's not going to have the same kind of impact as something that, really emphasizes your face. So just a little, sidebar about photos there. So what are you selling? Who are you trying to reach when you're selling that? And finally, what is your call to action? What do you want to accomplish by reaching out to this group? What do you want them to do as a result of your outreach? What action do you want them to take? We often forget this, or we shy away from asking. But what is it exactly? Do we want a booking? Do we want an exhibit? Do we want funding or a review or a referral or an advance quote, as I suggested? Do we want them to come to your show, sign your mailing list, buy merchandise, contribute to your crowdfunding? Whatever it is, we have to be able to ask that question, and make it clear in a way that's not off-putting, and make sure that that link to the tickets is always there. Find song clips here, buy tickets here, sign my mailing list here. Links on your website or in an e-blast are a great a tech device for a call to action. And these might exist in the form of professional requests in a letter or in an email. I'd be honored if you'd review my work. My title track seems to fit your show format, so I hope you'll consider playing it. I see that you've exhibited such and such an artist before. My work is in the same vein, so you might be interested in it again, and that brings in that comparison idea. So what's your call to action? Extremely important way to button up your marketing approach once you know what you're selling and who you're reaching out to. So your work as a self-marketed artist really starts with these three big questions. What are you selling? Who are you trying to reach? And what do you want from them? What is the call to action? What do you want them to do as a result? And you'll hopefully be able to answer these questions by doing, the self-research I described to you, and using the handout. You're going to get a handout at the end of this, which has all the questions and tips I suggested. So that will start you off on your self-research exploration, your journey. And hopefully doing this advanced work and collecting all this information will give you a wealth of material that you can pull from and draw from when you're creating your materials. It'll be a source of content for each group of people you're trying to reach. And it'll be your guide as to how that content should look, how it should sound, how it should be phrased. And eventually, hopefully, you'll become better and better at describing yourself in words and presenting yourself visually and achieving whatever your goal is as you market yourself and your work. So thank you for listening. And if anyone has any questions, I am happy to make an attempt to answer them as best as I can.
Just,
Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Hi, Hal.
I'm just saying, just in general, I mean, the comment or a question, tooting your own horn is always the hardest thing. I'm so great at promoting everybody else and all my colleagues and telling everybody else about everybody else. But to get myself to promote myself has always been my biggest obstacle to start.
Yep. That's why I wanted to have this little support group.
Yeah.
Did any of this kind of ring, hit home with you? And
Absolutely. I think there are enough things here to break through that logjam and just start to make some progress. Yeah.
That's great, because that's exactly the way I felt. And and even though I was a marketer, you know, even though that was my day job. Selling myself was absolutely the hardest thing. Yes, it's very easy to sell someone else. It absolutely is. But you have to, I think part of it is by doing this kind of self-research and starting to ask these questions, and also ask other people what they think about you and your work, helps you sort of take a step back and look at your, you know, it's like, okay, this product is this other thing, you know, we have to try to separate ourselves from the subject matter, which is very hard to do. But reaching out to other people, I think, is helpful because, you know, once you start asking people about what you do, you're going to hear really amazing things. You know, and I'm still going through that because, you know, I'm keep moving through different areas of creativity. And I, you know, moved into a new one in writing a musical over the past, you know, well, many years, but just completed it. And still, you know, I have this feeling of I have no business doing this. This must be terrible. And as I, you know, put it out there for people, I'm getting wonderful responses. And so we need that, you know, to, you know, beef up our self-confidence, number one, and number two, you know, use what they say in, you know, describing what we're doing. So yeah, I totally get where you are.
And if you're diverse, like you're saying, you do several different things, as do I, and probably a bunch of other people here in the group. Do you have different marketing plans for the different types of, like, let's say you have music for seniors, music for kiddies, music for jazz people, and all different, you have different marketing plans for each one, or you just say, here's somebody who does all these different things?
Well, no, I think that, I mean, certainly you could have a website that, you know, with different menu tabs that shows all of those different things that you do. But if you're beyond that, beyond, you know, having a place where you describe everything, I would say certainly you're going to do different types of outreach for each of those groups. Because think about it again, if you think of those questions, what are you selling? Each of those things is a different kind of product. Who are you trying to reach? You're going to reach, you're looking for different audiences with each of those. Clearly, you know, if you're doing kids music, that's a different audience. Who are you trying to sell to when you're selling stuff to kids? You're not even selling to the kids, you're selling to their parents, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, but those are not necessarily the same people that you're going to be selling to if you're promoting your Sunday jazz brunch shows. Now they may intersect for sure. You know, if you're, you know, if you have a mailing list, and I strongly advise everybody to have a mailing list. I know we all, you know, promote ourselves on social media these days, and that's fine. But, you know, having an, first of all, I don't know how many people know this. It took me a while to figure it out, but you don't see everything that somebody posts on Facebook. It doesn't always come up in your feed, right? So you're going to miss a lot of stuff. And people are going to miss a lot of stuff that you post. So you always want to also do an e-blast. If you can get people's email addresses at the very least, but also, you know, their mailing addresses so that you know what geographical area they're in, so that, well, you know, if you're doing a show in Nyack, you know, people who, fans of yours in California, you know, are not going to be there. So it's good to know as much as you can about your fans. And now that social media is such a big part of our promoting, I think that people lose sight of some of these old-fashioned ways of promoting, like having a list, you know, and even, you know, sending postcards. Now that nobody sends anything by mail, I mean, I know it's clearly more expensive, but now that people don't send stuff by mail, you get a little more attention if you do that. You know, particularly if you send to media, I think, and send them a fabulous photo of yourself or your artwork, or to, you know, gallery owners or whatever. You're gonna get some more attention that way. And granted, you know, because of the expense, you have to be selective about it. But again, that goes back to answering these questions. You know, who am I really promoting myself to? What's my geographic reach? What area do I really want to concentrate on? So anybody else, or Hal, do you have another question? Yeah, Lisa.
I thought I'd share something that jumped at me that I did do just this past year that you mentioned, and I didn't realize, I realized it after I did it, that it really, I don't know, it got people's attention, and people have repeated it back to me, which was, I'm a photographer and I have a book out of portraits of women portraying goddesses and sacred stories. And that's kind of the base of my work, is women and them portraying sacred stories. Yeah. So a friend of mine a couple of years ago had said to me, "Oh, you're the Annie Leibovitz of goddesses." And I never forgot it. And then I just sort of threw it in to a blurb a year ago. And it's like, everybody just like, it hooked everybody. It made them go like, "Oh yeah, you're a portrait artist, but you do goddesses." And it was like, it was like, wow, why didn't I put that in years ago when he said it?
Right. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And like stuff like that is pure gold. Now, if that's a reviewer that said it, great, you can, use their name, use their publication. If it's just a friend that said it, you can say has been called.
Yeah, that's
however you phrased it, it worked for you, and then people immediately got what you're about.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard for us to come up with that kind of thing. But like I said, this DJ, said that about me. This is perfect. The Annie Leibovitz of goddesses. Wow, that's a great phrase.
Yeah.
Has anybody else had an experience like that they came upon accidentally? So what I'm trying to get you to do now, especially if you've seen the success of that kind of stuff, is, be intentional about it. Try to find things like that. It's hard to solicit them. It's like go to your friends and say, okay, come up with some brilliant phrase that compares me to Annie Leibovitz or something. But if you just ask for feedback, sometimes you're going to get that kind of stuff. And Hal is nodding, and Joyce is nodding.
I just remembered that somebody said I'm a cross between Jerry Lee Lewis and Uncle Floyd. I thought, well,
there you go.
It's okay.
So see, as we say this, you might be remembering things that people have said about you. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that works really well. And that's, that works so much better than, trying to come up with. And granted, you do need to have, actual descriptions of what you do, but, you want something catchy that's going to draw people into reading that and to finding out more about you. So exactly that, those kinds of comparisons, or a cross between so and so and so and so, that's the kind of stuff we love. That we absolutely love that. And in the publishing world, I always joke about it, like having to say, okay, not since Gone with the Wind has there been such an epic novel. That was sort of when I knew that I had to come up with one of those comparisons. And sometimes it, we want to come up with those for ourselves because they really do work. And obviously, if somebody else says it, so much the better. Anything else that anybody else has experienced, or that this reminded them of?
I have one more question.
Mhm.
You just touched a little bit on websites, and with how like having like a pull down like for kids shows or this, but for example, I'm an artist. I do artist photography, but I also do commercial photography. And then I also have separate projects. So I actually have like a website for my art. I have a website for my commercial work. And then I have a website for one of the projects. And sometimes I think, well, that is just like crazy. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, they're all three the commercial is completely separate from the, you know, the headshots that I do is completely separate than the artwork. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I kind of, I'm in the same, I have the sort of the same dilemma right now. But I think that, and especially if your work is at least all in the same field, it's all in the field of photography. I think that having one website would work. I want to give you, if I can do it, you know what, look up Paul Sunday Photography. I'll just go put that in here. Paul Sunday. And Corinne Louie. I'm trying to type fast, photography. Both of those artists are, and if you just Google them, their websites will come up. Paul Sunday is the photographer who did these two artists, these two photographs right here. And he has, one of the things, the guy with the bass guitar is my husband, actually. And this other gentleman is, I'm not sure if he's an artist, if he's like a machinist with the shop, or if he's an artist who does, you know, mechanical kind of stuff. But Paul Sunday is a really interesting photographer. And on his website, he has portraits and he has commercial photography, which are also portraits, but they were portraits that were in magazines. And I think he just has two categories. But see how he does it. Because he's got, you know, he does, you know, he does portraits for hire for magazines, but he also does, you know, photography for individual artists. And his particular style is to photograph them, you know, in their milieu with their instruments, with their tools and all of that. But he also does these gorgeous sort of like model shots. So I think that, you know, if you're an artist and a photographer, it kind of, it maybe doesn't matter how you're selling that particular work, you know, but it is good to know that you want people to know that you're for hire, for sure, because that's the whole point of you know, being a commercial photographer. But I really think that, you know, showing your commercial work versus, you know, your, you know, art that you do for art's sake, you know, and finding a way to title that, I think that could all be on one website. Corinne Louie's website similarly has, she is a photographer, and she, as far as I know, strictly does, you know, headshots, you know, or portrait shots for hire. Of actors and, you know, personalities, artists, whatever. But she has, you know, headshots, which actors are going to use to, you know, present themselves to agents. And she's got what she calls personality shots. And I was, you know, showing you some examples of those. So that's one way of approaching it. Because the idea of doing a bunch of different websites, you know, it does seem, I don't know, it seems like, you know, just sort of a waste of money. And I know what you're talking about, because I'm really in different genres, because I'm a writer that does business writing, you know, and I'm also an actor, performer, you know, and I'm also writing my own stuff. So it's like, I am kind of all over the place. So, and to have a project website, I mean, you can certainly, as a photographer, have, you know, your photography and your projects, you know, latest projects, maybe.
Yeah.
That might be a way to do it.
Yeah.
So I feel your pain, but I think for you, there is a solution.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Great. Well, Mary Ellen, looks like we've come up on our time.
We have.
And wow, it went really quickly, I think, because you packed a lot of good information in there. Thank you for sharing those tips. I like when people present in that way that's easily digestible, but is
Good.
like good content. So thank you. And I am going to be sending, I will share the recording with everyone who registered. There are definitely more people that registered that I know would like to watch the recording afterwards. So everyone
Mhm.
here and everyone who registered will receive the recording. And I know you also have a handout to share with everyone, which I can get to everybody as well. And is there a way that people can find out more about you or reach you?
Yes, and in fact, I was going to, I'm gonna put my email address in here right now.
And I can make sure to share it as well when I send out, when I follow up with that, with the information.
And of course, here I am, the marketing person, and I desperately need a new website because I've been working one of my day jobs is this company, Triple Z Music, which I run with my husband. We do music for corporate events. And, you know, I spend most of my time worrying about that website. So my personal artist website is from like 1993. But in the About Us, you can find, you know, a link to more about me and what I do. But I would love for everybody who is on this, you know, to email me and send me your information, and feel free to contact me if you have any further questions or anything that you think about later. I'm happy to talk with you, you know, give you whatever specific advice that I can, you know, happy to help out. So, you know, if you didn't want to ask anything tonight, or as I said, if you just didn't think about it, or you think about something later, or as you're going through the questions, trying to, you know, compile stuff, feel free to reach out to me. I am going away on Friday, and we'll be away for a week. So, you know, if you reach out to me this week or next, you won't hear back from me. But after that, I'll be happy to, you know, get back in touch with you.
Great, fantastic. Well, with that, thank you so much, Mary Ellen, and thank you to everybody for joining.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
And put November 15th on your calendar, media training with Elliot Forrest. It's going to be great. So
Great.
have a great night, everybody. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Thanks for attending, and thanks for having me, Cheryl. Good night, all.
All right.